Welcome back everyone to Rocks for Jocks. Today I'm going to be speaking with my close friend, Aidan Bailey. Aidan and I met in college where we rode together and took some classes together. Aidan studied physics, then got his master's in biomedical engineering. After that, Aidan went to go work at a biotech company in Cambridge and is currently in medical school at Wayne State University in Detroit. I had Aidan on for one of my first episodes back in early 2024. He stayed over my apartment a few nights during his winter break, so I told him he must record another episode with me as payment. Today, we're going to talk about anything related to medical school, which Aidan wants to talk about. He is in the first year of his MD/PhD program, meaning that he'll be in school for around 8 years and then finish with both a medical degree and a PhD degree. Aidan talks a lot more about the details of the purpose of getting both degrees, so keep listening to find out more. If you like this episode, tell your friends. If you hate it, tell your enemies. But for real, please subscribe and send this episode to any friends or family who might enjoy it. The best way to grow podcasts is through word of mouth, and I really appreciate every new listener I get. Now, sit back and enjoy the show. Aidan, welcome back to another episode of Rocks for Jocks. Is there anything you want to start off with?
Yeah, I should begin with a disclaimer that these are my own personal opinions and experiences and not those of anybody official at my school or my program. Med school is cool. So I've already been there for about 6 months. My school does it a little bit differently. We do like trimesters essentially. So I've done through 2 of the 3 trimesters in my first year.
How's that working?
It's different per year. The first 2 years are split into like 3-month blocks. So there's 3-month blocks per each. So come April, I'm actually going to already be in my second year, even though I won't have been in school for a year at all. It's just how they divvy it up. It's a lot of material, obviously. It's sure, everybody who goes through it says the same things. They say, oh, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It's more like if you're being fed a drop of water every second for like a 3-month period of time. So like you imagine by the end of 3 months, you're like very full of water, but it's just like a slow drip that doesn't stop. I think that's better because drinking from a fire hose to me is more like you're being bombarded with information and you can only retain so much of it. Whereas in my opinion, of course, if you actually are approaching it appropriately, you should be learning everything and mastering as much of the content as possible. So it shouldn't be this fire hose experience where you're only getting what you can. It should be you're getting everything, but it is still a lot, obviously, to get through, if that makes sense.
How do you feel it's gone for you so far? Do you feel like you've been able to kind of learn things as you go and master it as you go along here, or has it turned out to more of a fire hose situation in certain areas?
I'd say it's definitely totally different from how I studied in undergrad. I did physics as an undergrad, so I was doing a lot of math. And obviously medical school is more information-based. You're not really doing, especially in the early years, you're not really doing a lot of problem solving. It's more like learning the information and understanding how the human body actually is put together and how it works. So the style of everything is very different. It's all multiple choice questions as well. So I think your study approach has to change. I mean, I've been relatively successful. The biggest thing for medical school is it's just not falling behind. It's about keeping up with the material and repeating it enough and like I write my own questions, for instance, which is, I think, critical because you have to not just learn the information, but understand how it all interacts. And so that you actually retain what you're learning rather than just like temporarily memorizing a whole bunch of information. Because obviously like human memory, you can remember a lot of stuff, but like you really want to understand it and like be able to put it into practice in future years. Like you have to have that kind of spaced repetition, answering questions, thinking about potential practice problems. And a lot of those resources are provided to us. But generally, that's what I've found to be the good approach. Like it's definitely different from what I did in undergrad, but my method works for me. And really, that's all you can worry about is yourself in terms of the grades. Like it's not a competition, right? Because all my classes are pass fail. The only person I'm beating is myself. It's up to me and me alone for my performance. So I have my method. It works for me. I tell other people about it, but it doesn't necessarily work for them, and that's okay. You just have to find what works for you, and you have the exams and practice quizzes and stuff to test whether you actually know your stuff or not.
Yeah, I guess then kind of dig into that a little bit. What are some of the strategies that you use? Like, how do you start to formulate those questions for yourself? Where does that process start and end for you?
Yeah, I mean, I knew coming in that undergrad, I used to take notes by hand completely, and they didn't provide us with lecture notes anyways. So you kind of had to do it. But that was because of the nature of the classes I was taking. It was easy to write stuff down by hand. And doing math by hand is obviously way easier than doing it on a computer, in my opinion, at least while you're learning. But for med school, there's just too much information. There's no physical way that you can write as much as what they want you to learn. So they also provide us with lecture notes. So what I found to be helpful is on the lecture notes, like I'll jot down my own notes in the margins, or like I'll put in my own words what the notes are saying. And then that's where, like, when I first pass the materials, like me going through the notes and like trying to actively engage with it. I don't watch the lectures anymore. We have asynchronous pre-recorded lectures, and like quite honestly, a lot of them are not very helpful, and they're kind of a waste of time. And time is very precious.
You don't even watch the lectures to begin with?
No, yeah, I just look at the lecture notes because all the questions come from the lecture notes, and more often than not, unfortunately, I find like the lectures just take too long to go through because you're both trying to read the notes, take your own notes, and listen to what they're saying. It's like a lot of redundancy in my head. So I find that not watching the lectures is a much better use of my time. Not obviously that's for me. Other people love to watch the lectures and have the professors explain. I'm not trying to knock anybody there. I'm just saying for me, it just became like a huge time sink to go through everything. I found that I could just read the notes, process it in my own words, and that was sufficient for me to be able to learn the material. So that's what I do, and I write my own questions based on that. So I'll literally just like go through the whole set of notes and then say, okay, if there are 4 things listed here, I'll try to like categorize it. And like you just have to kind of trial and error like with your questions, seeing whether you're actually learning the material or not. My second pass through material is going through all those questions and then double checking them against the notes and then writing like my own outline in my own words of the notes. And then by that time, it's like so much repetition. And then we also have in-person assignments that we do with a team. So it's just once again reinforcing the material perpetually over time. I know like other people use this thing called Anki, but I don't use that at least in my first year because it's all faculty authored content. A lot of Anki, it's basically like digital flashcards in a lot of ways, and people use decks that were made by previous students. But like the material changes each year, and then there's some classes or lectures that weren't covered with the Anki deck. So to me, I don't want to use other people's resources. I think part of the learning process is being able to know how to make resources that work for you. All of those things together have allowed me to be successful. I'm learning the material and I'm passing my exams. So I feel very good about what I've been able to accomplish so far. But also, you obviously have to adapt. Come second year, it's going to be a totally different thing because the way my school breaks it up basically is we do a healthy person systems based for the first year, and then we do all disease for the second year. And so the disease part may require a different approach, but I don't know until I'm there. I'm still in the healthy, like we have one more trimester of healthy patient left. So, but yeah, that's what I found. I mean, I have other classes too, not just like the main course. I have anatomy lab where we do a full body dissection. We do that throughout the year rather than some other schools do it in like a very specific block of time. I've really enjoyed that. I mean, I go in every Thursday and we have one lab assigned to us, and I have a group of 4 people that we dissect with, and you don't really know what you're looking at or what you're cutting through or anything, but all the professors are there. They have prosectors who are like other medical students who have done the dissections before, there to help you. It's really cool because you also get to appreciate just how like different most people's anatomy is. You know, like every person has different anatomical structures. There's like obviously commonality, but you really get to appreciate with full body dissection like how different everybody actually appears. And that's obviously clinically relevant if you're going to be doing surgery and you need to know like landmarks and stuff for the person that you're operating on. So that's part of our curriculum too, obviously. We also do clinical skills, which is we practice with actor patients, learning how to do basic physical exams and taking histories. So I have that a couple times per block, and then final exams where I'm tested on my ability to do the whole visit and make sure I'm practicing empathy and everything, all the important parts of being a doctor, in my opinion. And then you like to write a note and you give an oral presentation. So it's pretty comprehensive, but it's very like textbook. It's not like the same as seeing an actual patient, which I haven't done in any official capacity yet. I will start to do that in my second year. And then we have this other course, P4, that's just kind of like social sciences and professional identity development and so on. So that's like cool.
As you said, the most important part of being a doctor.
Yeah.
Or I should say maybe the most commonly skipped over. What do you think?
Well, I think it's hard. I mean, I think there's a lot of demands on doctors, not to excuse anybody who has a poor bedside manner, but I think that there's a lot of pressures for doctors to have to shorten the visit and get to just what's important. And then they can't address everything necessarily. And obviously, you're dealing with patients or people, like they have whole lives and you're only seeing them briefly. It's like you can only do so much for them and get so much information from them. So I think it's really important to be able to be adept with being empathetic and knowing how to sense when something else is going on that may be important to the medical care of the person that you're taking care of. But it just takes time and practice. And I think the structure of the medical system, unfortunately, makes it so that healthcare practitioners, not just doctors, they don't really get enough time to really thoroughly evaluate patients and make sure patients feel heard and understood. But I think that that's unfortunately just all born out of profit-driven stuff. Like you want to be getting as many patients in as possible. You want to get through as many procedures and tests because that's how you generate revenue. And that's how it's run at the moment. So like that unfortunately predisposes it to you not being able to spend as much time with patients and make sure that they actually feel like people. I still think it's possible to do it in that short frame of time, but I think it is a lot harder. But that's just my personal view on it.
No, that was great. Thank you. And then you mentioned dissections in there. I'm assuming this is dissections of people.
Yes. Yeah.
How's that work? How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool. I don't have any. I mean, I wasn't like offended by the smell or anything. I mean, it's an honor to be able to do this. These people donated their bodies to this program for my specific education and the education of my peers. I cannot express how like grateful I am to people that do this. This is how we learn. There's no greater teacher than having the actual human body to be able to explore and see just how it is. Because I mean, you can look at diagrams, you can even look at like prosected, like previously dissected limbs and so on, and it's like you can look at it all you want, but actually going in there and doing it, you have a much better appreciation of how delicate and important it is to take care of and respect the human body and like what that actually means. And I mean, it's cool to actually see, once again, all the variation. You can appreciate way more how like every person, every patient you see is a unique individual. And like, it's our job as future healthcare practitioners to like really take that as seriously as possible. So I think being able to do the full body dissection, we also have this whole program that basically covers like burial services, etc. And there's a whole memorial service at the end of the year, which we all get to attend. I mean, it's just a very powerful and meaningful thing, and I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity, and I'm grateful to everybody who signs up for those programs and allows the education of people like me who are going to try to give back to society with what we learn with this experience.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. Do you have to go out of your way to sign up for something like that? Is that just part of maybe being like an organ donor, or how does that process work?
I'm not entirely sure how it works, but I know that a lot of medical schools have these types of programs where you can get in contact with them. And then if you're interested in doing it, you can sign up and they can help you out with that whole process. But yeah, every medical school pretty much has programs that can coordinate that if you're so interested.
Cool. What's been your favorite class so far, would you say?
Well, it's hard because like medical school isn't like traditional undergrad again. There aren't specific classes. I mean, there are, but they're very broad. For instance, in 1 week, I could have 3 biochem lectures, and then I'll have 3 anatomy lectures, and then I'll have 3 histology lectures. And then the next week, I could have all physiology lectures. My school does not break it into specific blocks like we did in traditional undergrad. I really enjoy the main course with the dissection and everything. So far, we've learned about musculoskeletal. We've done all the basic biochem of the body. We've done cardiology, pulmonology, gastrointestinal, and renal. And then next block, we do reproductive, endocrine, and central nervous system. So we go through every single system of the body. Oh, we also did skin briefly in the first block as well. So, I mean, I just love all of it. You know, this is what I wanted to do. The human body is crazy to me that it works and how much we actually understand about it. It's like you really begin to appreciate just how much work has gone into understanding all this stuff and how intricate the body is and like how everything is interconnected. It's just fascinating. I'd say, I mean, being able to learn about all this stuff and also just learning about how to practice to be a doctor, definitely. And I'm excited for the clinical relevancies that we'll get more in the second year with disease. I mean, I definitely enjoy that the most. And I love dissection. I mean, it's very difficult, but it's really cool to see it with your own eyes, like being able to see the heart and the lungs and appreciate how complicated and beautiful these things actually are and how they work. It gives you a whole new appreciation and respect for what we are, as people. It's crazy to me.
So I've known you for a long time, obviously before medical school started, and then I didn't see you for the first 2 blocks of your education. I saw you briefly at the end of your semester, and then we're talking again now. What is it, week and a half later? When I saw you right after your semester ended, you seemed like you were just bursting with information and like passion for everything you'd learned so far. And then seeing you a week and a half later, after you've, I'm sure, gotten some sleep and rest and relaxation kind of thing, you're still bursting with that like knowledge and passion, but you seem like so much more relaxed and thorough with everything you're saying. And yeah, just like super impressed, I guess, with the way you've been able to kind of tackle the semester and not only retain the information, but it actually seems to have increased your energy rather than beat you down, which I think is a very good sign for the future. Yeah, just wanted to say I'm impressed with that, I guess.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's very kind of you.
Do you have like a favorite professor there? Like, do you get to interact with them at all? Do you get to interact with maybe like researchers during dissections, anything like that, practitioners?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We actually have very limited contact with a lot of the faculty because, once again, all of our lectures are pre-recorded. And if we even have questions on those specific lectures, like you tend to more reach out to the course director rather than the specific professor that gave that lecture. So it's a little bit of a different structure than undergrad. Like they don't have office hours that you can just go to. So it's more difficult to establish relationships with the professors. But the interactions that we do have, like they're facilitators for our in-person assignments. I mean, one Dr. Rod Braun, I mean, he's definitely one of my favorites. He's one of the histology professors. His lectures, and he directs the histology lab assignments that we do as well. I understand microanatomy of everything so well because of the way that he organizes and explains everything. He's so enthusiastic about the material, and he's such a nice person too when you see him. Always answers your questions really thoroughly and clearly. Always tells you if it's something that he doesn't know about or he doesn't know and where to go if you want to find those answers. So like very humble as well. Very interested in our success as students. And like, he's just a pleasure to be around. Definitely, he's one of my favorite professors. I'd say Dr. Ryan Thummel as well. He's also the program director for the MD PhD programs. He's a resource for me as well for that. He's incredibly nice, very thorough, also explains everything very clearly. No stupid questions with him. He gives incredible explanations of everything. So I'd say those two definitely at the top of my list. But really, I'd say the content generally is very good. It takes a lot of self-directed learning, I would say, in medical school. It's up to you to really keep up with the material. They really treat you as an adult rather than a younger student who needs help. In some ways, I mean, there is a lot of hand-holding still, but it's really your responsibility to learn the material. It's on you to do everything. Like the faculty are there as needed, but you are the one responsible for your learning is what I'll say.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So you're in the MD PhD program. So that's a combination of medical school and doctoral research, however you want to phrase it.
Yep.
But there's only a handful of people at your university who are in that program at each individual class. So I think you said there's like 6 or 7 people in your year.
Yep.
But for the medical school classes, you're mixed in with a bunch of students who are just there for medical school itself. I'm wondering if you can maybe talk a little bit about your classmates in general and maybe any differences you see between medical school only versus MD PhD, at least kind of first impressions from the first few months there.
Yeah, I mean, everybody I go to school with are incredibly smart and dedicated, which you would hope that they would be being in medical school. The only real distinction for MD PhD students, I think, is that we've signed up for a whole other degree. I mean, and it's research focused. So I think that's really the only distinction. I wouldn't say that we're like any smarter or better than the other students. I wouldn't say that at all. I mean, everybody I met is extremely intelligent, like focused on their future. A lot of very dedicated people who are interested in medicine for the right reasons. I mean, there might be a few people who are doing it for other reasons that I wouldn't necessarily do it for, but generally, like, Everybody I met, very nice, down to earth, very smart. Once again, very dedicated, focused on academics, learning everything we need to learn because they take the responsibility of becoming a doctor very seriously, which is great. I mean, I'm glad that the admissions process selects people like this because this is the way it should be. What part of your question?
No, yeah, that's fine. That answers it. Yeah, just kind of curious, I guess, like what the other students are like in general. I've never been to medical school. I know a handful of people that have gone, but honestly, it was people that I knew in college for the most part, and then I haven't seen them since. So I can't say exactly if medical school has changed them or what it's like kind of being around dozens or hundreds of other people like themselves. So just anything you have to tack onto that.
Yeah, I mean, I think medical school definitely changes you. For some people, I mean, I think generally to be successful, sometimes you have to change what you did in the past, and the degree that you're willing to change what you did in the past, I think determines your success. It definitely makes people very mature because, I mean, you're thinking about it like you're taking a bunch of young 20-year-olds and people in their early 20s, really early to mid 20s. And then by the time 4 years goes by, generally speaking, you were making them into essentially on their way to being independent practicing physicians. So I think with the exposure, like the amount of material that we have to learn and what it's rooted in, and then also patient interaction and so on, hopefully it makes people into more, empathetic people who have a better perspective on like how we all come from different walks of life, and medicine is focused on people first and foremost, and whatever issue they may be addressing that needs to be addressed, like from both a physiological but also from like a social, psychological standpoint. You have to really look at the whole person every time that you're treating somebody for a certain condition. So I think it takes a certain type of person to be able to handle that maturely and appropriately, and like being able to admit when you don't know something, and like when you have to try to figure something out, and who to consult with, and how to be professional, how to be kind, how to be patient, how to manage a lot of different responsibilities. I mean, I think it forces people who go through it to really grow up and mature very quickly, because you have to do it in order to take on this level of responsibility. And if you don't do it, I mean, you're not successful, and that's unfortunate. So I would say people in medical school are definitely very dedicated, very smart. And it's really the time management, I think, and then really owning that sense of responsibility and knowing that you're accountable to the patients that you treat and how to best provide for their care in light of everything that goes on in their life. I mean, I think it takes a very specific type of person to do that. So that's my answer to that question, I guess.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then what about, did you find yourself thinking at all back on either undergraduate classes or any graduate courses that you took prior to med school? Have you found that any of those courses in particular help you more than others? And maybe like there's aspects of the way that they were taught or just the content itself that have specifically prepared you for what you're going through now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for one, having a physics degree has helped me enormously, not because of specific physics knowledge or anything like that, but I think just because doing physics teaches you how to actually like critically think about stuff and how to be organized. But I'd say in terms of specific course content, like I'm really glad that I took biochem and genetics and physiology in undergrad, because in medical school, you really learn a lot of the same stuff. It just goes that extra step of detail. If you're fortunate enough to be able to take those classes in undergrad, you can fit them into your schedule. I would obviously highly recommend that you do that, because the pace and everything, the level of detail that you learn in medical school, it really, if you don't have the foundation from those previous classes, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it definitely takes way more effort to be able to learn all that stuff. Like particularly like once you get to renal physiology, or we haven't done neuro yet, but I imagine that too is pretty difficult. If you don't already have that foundation, you have to do that extra step on your own just to even be getting a foundational grasp of the knowledge. So a depth, physiology, biochem, genetics for the content, just because it reinforces what you learn in medical school, and then it allows you to have that base level knowledge that you can add to for the level of detail that they expect you to know. I'm really glad that I took, once again, like physics, math, even like writing courses, like learning just how to think about problems and approach them from all angles. And I know we're not learning it yet, but I think in the future too, with like coming up with a differential diagnosis and knowing what tests and so on to order and how to actually think through problems and addressing everything that a presenting patient would have, like that requires critical thinking, and for you to be as, able to take on multiple perspectives that may be competing with one another, being able to center yourself in that, I think is important. So I think finding classes that will teach you how to critically think and also just have the base level content knowledge to be approaching the medical school curriculum and not be faced with a lot of stuff that's unfamiliar to you, like you've literally never learned. I think that if you've already learned at least part of it, you're going to obviously be more successful because it's already been in your head and it's just serving as a reminder for you.
Cool. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about was the kind of research aspect, I guess, maybe the PhD aspect a couple of years down the line. So I know you and I have talked about this in the past. I think you said that there's around 2 years of medical school, then 4-ish years of PhD, and then your last 2-ish years of medical school. That you're nodding your head, so I'm guessing that's still kind of the case.
Yes. Yep.
And then, so that's it for structure. And then for content, I'm wondering if you can talk maybe a little bit about some of the options that you have for either research groups or research projects in the future. If you have no idea what's coming, if you get any kind of choice in how that works at all, or if it kind of gets assigned to you.
Yeah. So my school, I mean, basically all the MD PhD programs are structured very similarly, where you do like the preclinical part of the medical school curriculum first. And then you take something called Step 1, which is the first licensing exam that you have to take in medical school out of 3. Once you take that and everybody else in your regular MD class goes to clerkships, usually that's when you start the PhD. You start with lab rotations, and then you have to do whatever graduate coursework is left to get you enough credits to actually get the PhD. And then you just start full-time lab research as soon as possible. At my school, you can pick any department. They have agreements with pretty much every department in the biological sciences. We even have like chemistry and anthropology. There's a bunch of different options. And they're very open to you even having like faculty who aren't necessarily on the main campus of the school. Like you can go to another school. Even we've had students do their PhDs away if they have good relationships with professors. So there's a lot of flexibility at my program for what you want to do. And it's really, for me, I mean, I won't start doing that till about 2026, like March or April of 2026. But yeah, you can really, it's about, for me, finding the right advisor. Specific subject matter matters to me a little bit less. I just want to make sure I find somebody who's really going to teach me how to be an independent scientist, or give me the opportunity to learn how to be an independent scientist. Go through the whole academic exercises of writing grants and publications and getting enough data to justify things and so on and so forth. Really learn how to do the research process independently. Right now I haven't really, because medical school takes up so much time, and like we're kind of encouraged not to really pursue research at this point anyways, because we have time. I mean, we're doing a whole PhD, so we have time to figure out what we want to do research in and who we want to do research with. For me right now, I'm focusing on medical school. I haven't really looked into the research stuff at all yet, but that's coming up quickly within another year. Now that we're in 2025, I will be there. I will do lab rotations next year, actually, in the summer, and then hopefully pick an advisor and move on from there. Do the whole PhD, and go back to medical school.
Yeah, just easy. Knock out a PhD. Easy as that.
Yeah, it's not gonna be easy, but in terms of talking about it generally, it is easy to say like, oh yeah, it's just gonna be like a 4-year thing, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it might be easier than medical school.
I have no idea. There will remains to be seen for me. It's different for everybody, obviously, but we'll see.
That's funny. Do you have any gut feelings off the first couple of months which research topics you think may interest you more in the future? And you feel free to say no as well.
No, it's hard. I mean, I think part of my problem is like I'm interested in everything. I mean, I really mean it. Like I would do research in pretty much anything. I don't really want to do like anything behavioral. I don't want to necessarily do like human subject research or anything like that, or even anything behavioral with like rodents. I really like basic science, like translational type of things, but that can be in really any body system, any field. Like I'm not against doing like biochem or physiology or whatever. So yeah, I really, at this point, I don't know. For me, once again, it's more about finding the right mentor in whatever department that might be, and then because I am interested in so many things, I don't mind doing research on stuff that I've never even learned about before, as long as the advisor is somebody that I work with well and is going to support me enough so that I can become independent without them being micromanaging. The biggest concern is it's not so much the subject matter, it's finding the right person.
How do you think you're going to go about finding the right advisor? Do you have kind of like a criteria or like set of questions or something, or yeah, I guess what's your thought process going into that?
I mean, I would say mostly it's like vibes. I want somebody that I feel like we're operating on the same bandwidth. Like, I do not want somebody who's going to micromanage me. I don't know anybody who really wants that, but I want to be independent. And if I'm going to fail, I want to fail obviously with a little bit of a safety net. Like, I don't want to fail and then make it so that I can't graduate, obviously, but that's the only way that you're going to learn. So I need an advisor who's not going to be so, involved that they prevent me from having those types of processes, because that's not what it's about. But I'd also want to be able to have somebody I can turn to in situations that inevitably arise where I don't know what the next steps are, like what to do next. And somebody with not necessarily a lot of experience, but like somebody who can serve as an advisor, really. Somebody who isn't going to do the work for me, but like will provide me with advice to help me make that next step and grow as an independent scientist. So, I mean, it's hard with just a few meetings, whether you have to look at their work too and how they approach it, and then talk to graduate students they've had in the past or any postdocs or lab techs that may work with them and get a gauge on, if they talk about their style of instruction or advisement, and then you talk to their students and it's inconsistent with what they say, obviously that's kind of a red flag. So like, it's things like that, just doing your due diligence essentially, and then finding that right fit. I mean, for me, that really is more of an intuition thing than something that you can really like find just by talking to someone and getting their explanation of what they do. It's more about the vibes once again.
No, you're right. The vibes are important, right? Everyone factors personality into their decision-making process, with both when you're hiring people and when you're looking to get hired. Yeah, so I don't mean to discount that at all. And the other thing I want to dig into, just while we're on the topic of the PhD stuff, can you maybe explain a little bit about why you're doing both degrees at the same time? Like what the purpose is of an MD, PhD? Yeah, I guess kind of benefits, drawbacks, if there are any. Yeah, just kind of curious to get your take on that.
I mean, I think it's to prepare you to be both a physician and a scientist. It's for somebody who knows that they want to do research, but also wants to both practice medicine and be able to speak in the language of medicine, right? Because I think there are a lot of doctors out there who work in clinical practice full-time, have no involvement in research, right? And they are on the front lines. They're seeing how things develop and change. They see what's working, what's not working, right? They incorporate those things evidence-based into their practice. It's really researchers who help them to, figure out, okay, when I need this procedure done, or when I implement this treatment for this disease, or I have these comorbidities. Researchers are the ones who are actually doing the work to test whether to change a particular intervention or not, or to see what outcomes are after a certain procedure, just to give a few examples. So I'd say like there are medical practitioners out there who they're on the front lines, they're getting all this knowledge, but they may not necessarily know or have the time or interest in like doing the actual research or participating in the research process, even though they're the ones seeing all these problems for themselves. And then there are researchers who may have no interest in seeing patients, but are interested in working on problems that require scientific reasoning and will help people or will help to solve a problem that needs to be solved. So I think doing the MD PhD is like you're somebody who cannot be satisfied with just doing one or the other. Like you really want to learn how to be that independent scientist, which is what the PhD experience gives you. But also being a physician, you know how to identify things, medical problems for yourself that need to be addressed. And you have the research background to be able to address them, get the appropriate resources and solve those problems and put them into practice, right? So it's really the flexibility that both degrees provide. I mean, you can absolutely do research as just an MD, but for me, doing the PhD it's really about getting that full-fledged training process, really learning how to be completely independent. Also, just logistically speaking, it's obviously far easier for you to get a grant with a PhD than if you're just an MD, because with an MD, you'd have to go and do all of these additional research experiences and during your residency and fellowship, and even when you're in medical school still. And because medical school is so time consuming, you don't necessarily get the opportunity to get as much independent research practice and experience as obviously somebody who does a whole PhD. So I think if you know you want to do research and you still want to practice medicine and you want to be able to combine both of them, I think the MD PhD program is ideal for teaching you to do that, right? It's the best way to go about it if you know that you want to combine both research and medical practice. Have research that's very focused on medical practice.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like the goal is to be able to kind of run your own clinical trials or some sort of medical trials to figure out what
or a
medical
lab
practice is working.
Also, it's mostly, you can run a clinical trial just as an MD.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because once you get to a clinical trial point of view, it's like there's a lot that goes into like designing and implementing and running a clinical trial. Obviously, if you're a physician on a clinical trial, you have the knowledge of what questions need to be asked and what needs to be addressed, especially as like a treatment progresses or so on and so forth. Like, how do you handle those problems and manage them from a medical point of view? But like for the PhD part, it's like you can, and once again, there are MDs out there absolutely who run their own labs and don't need the PhD at all. But like, I think for most people, if you really want to do that full in-depth experience and you have the clout that comes with having a PhD, because that unfortunately is a very important part of it. Like, it's for running like a basic science lab, like doing work that may take a few years to get into clinical practice. If you're trying to design a drug, for instance, or identify like the genetic component of a disease, like that, you can't do clinical trials on that necessarily right away. You need to have the basic science information well understood before you can implement any future like therapies or anything else if you're focused on that. So that's really what I'd say is what the PhD mostly prepares you to do is being able to run a lab. If you want to do clinical trials, obviously the PhD isn't going to hurt you either. Like, that's only going to help with your experience. You can work from the basic science part all the way up until the clinical trial and implementing the clinical trial and testing new therapies and so on and so forth. So I'd say that's what really distinguishes the dual degree program's purpose is over just the regular MD interested in research.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as well. And then the last kind of fun question I have for you here, I want to be mindful of your time. I know you have a flight to catch out of here soon. So Wayne State University is in Detroit. I've never been to Detroit. Tell me about the city, how you're liking it there. How's the pizza?
Detroit's great. I think Detroit has, gets a bad rap for no reason. People who have this idea of what it is have never been there. I've never bothered taking the time to go there and exploring it for themselves, I think. Not to say that it's some kind of perfect haven. Obviously, it still has its issues. But it's a really cool city. A lot of history there. A lot of stuff. If you really like cars, obviously it's the place to go because, GM, Ford, and Stellantis are all operating out of the Detroit area. I know that there's a big EDM techno scene there.
Oh, really?
They have all the major sports teams. You got the Lions. The Lions were doing very well, actually, as of late. Almost made it to the Super Bowl last year. Unfortunately, I haven't been keeping up with them now, but they're really good.
They're doing well.
And that's right in downtown. There's also the Pistons and the Red Wings and the Tigers. So you got all the major sports teams all right there in downtown. A lot of really cool restaurants, and it seems like every day and if I'm looking, there's another restaurant I have never heard of or been to that's amazing. There's a lot of cool bars, speakeasies if you're into that type of stuff. I'd say the one issue I have with it is, especially coming from Boston, is that you need a car basically to go anywhere and do anything. There is a bus system and there is the Q line, but it's really insufficient for the size of Detroit. And unfortunately also Detroit, a lot of resources and so on have been pushed out of the city and into the suburbs, which once again makes it inaccessible to most people who live there. Because once again, you need a car and then you need the time, money to be able to go out to those places. But generally, I think Detroit's great. Everybody should go there, visit it, and see what it's like. There are a bunch of casinos downtown too, if you're into that. But if you want to do that, it's certainly available to you. All kinds of concerts and stuff come all the time. Huge airport, so easy to get to, easy to get from. Like you can pretty much go anywhere in the country, and there are a lot of direct flights, which is nice. I mean, I'm excited. I've only been there for 6 months, so obviously I'll be there for a while. So we can keep coming back to this question because I only have more time to spend there and really discover what a great place it already is. But keep exploring it and yeah, hopefully keep spreading the good word about it because it's really a cool place that I think a lot of people overlook.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear you're enjoying it so much. I hope to keep doing this podcast every, I don't know, 6 to 8 months and getting little snapshots of both your opinion of science and medicine and also Detroit, med school in general, how things are going. Kind of track your life as you go along here. And again, you just seem so much more energized now and thrilled with life. It's good to see. Anything else you want to share with the people?
Go Warriors.
Go what?
Go Warriors, Wayne State Warriors.
Oh, great. Yeah, everyone knows exactly who those people are.
Well, they do now.
It's a mascot. Great. Thank you so much.